Is your debt causing you sleepless nights? Knock your debt out with Debt KO. And your debt won't be the only thing keeping you up at night. Debt KO, free, impartial advice on all your debt. This is KUGAN CASSIUS for IFL TV in association with MTK Global. We're back at the Matchroom Residency bubble again, like Groundhog Day here. Delighted to be joined by Mr. Arums. How are you, Adam?
Yeah, I'm good. It's good to see you. It's the Matchroom Residency, the bubble. It is exactly what I was thinking Groundhog Day when I drove in yesterday into the car park and thought I know exactly where I'm going to park, and then I'm going to go to the test, and then off we go to our rooms, and then it doesn't get any easier, does it? The 24 hours in the room. You should try and sort of find things to do every hour and keep you going, but it is. And then you come out and it's a whole load of new, apart from me and you and Eddie, it's a whole load of new people, isn't it? And but it's good. It's good fun. And look, we'd rather be doing this than not, wouldn't we? So we have to adapt, and on we go. Another show Saturday night after a fantastic one last weekend, and yeah, it's going to be a really good run up to Christmas.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the card first of all this week. Obviously headlined by Conor, Benn and Sebastian Formella. I think it's probably the most overused term alongside Sebastian Formella that we know he's fought Sean Porter. Yeah. I think it's been used a few times, but he has, so that's kind of say the credentials he comes with, but the best name on his opponent, Sean Porter, couldn't get him out of there. So does Conor Benn go out to make a statement this weekend? Yeah,
Sebastian's been around a while. I mean, he was an IBO champion as well. He was unbeaten going into that fight with Sean Porter. I was there when Porter fought Errol Spence, which was an absolute classic. And I think they probably wanted a good opponent on paper for Porter's come back there. An unbeaten guy from Europe, but who wasn't going to cause too many problems. And that's what happened. Formella went the distance, but he lost it and lost it wide. Look, it's a good marking stick this for Conor Benn to see whether he can develop into becoming a champion at whatever level. We don't know. He doesn't know. He keeps saying it's a ceiling, and the ceiling is there, and whether he's going to get to a British level, a European level, a world level, we don't know. He had very little amateur experience. All the pressure on him because of Nigel, but Nigel quite rightly took the pressure, or as much as he could, away from Conor, and Conor became his own man. And look, he's gone through injuries, he's gone through ups and downs already, as he mentioned, the Cedric Peno fight, the people just saying he's not going to be anything, he's not going to do anything. I like Conor. He's 24, he's young, he's learning. What I like most about him is his work ethic. Him and Tony Sims have been together a long time. He's very, although he says he wants to get in there and have a tear up and smash his opponent, ultimately his feet are on the ground. He learns, he's like a sponge, he takes it all in, and we don't know how good he's going to be. There's something we like about him, isn't there? It's not just that he's Nigel's son. He gets great figures for us on digital and social. People want to see him. He's a guy. He's a bit of a sort of a real hard guy, and you want to see him fight because he excites you. I think his boxing ability has improved in the last 3 or 4 fights. I think he's boxing nicely behind a jab, and I think that he'll need everything to beat Sebastian Formella. If he can prove that, if he can prove he's got the class to live with Formella and has the boxing ability to cope, then he can move to the next level. I mean, we all know the welterweight division in the world is hugely competitive. It's frightening in many ways, and I'd like to see him with someone like Chris Jenkins at British level, and let's see where we go with that. But first and foremost, this is his toughest test to date against Formella. I think it's one that Conor can come through, but I think he might have some difficulties, and if Formella can get, who will come with a lot of confidence from that Porter fight, and he'll probably believe he's just too good for Conor Benn. If he can get into a rhythm and start ticking the rounds off, then it could get very tough for Conor. But I think he's fresh, and his attitude, and if he keeps himself together and composed and listens to Tony Sims, I think he can come through it. But it's a tough fight.
Moving along the card, obviously Fabio Wardley is taking on Richard Lartey. We had a rather eventful press conference with, I don't know who it was it the Savage or was it Alan Babbage? I think it was quite kind of, I don't know what the word to explain it, but it was, I mean, it's almost like he was right gunning for Tom Little to bite in that press conference.
You don't know, do you, when you walk past him, whether he's going to be one or the other, and sometimes he can switch in the middle of a conversation. So I like Alan Babbage. I like the Savage. You know, he's a great character, and that's what we need in the sport. There's a nice thread sort of going through here with Conor, with Fabio Wardley, with Alan Babbage. We don't quite know how far they're going to go, each one of them. You know, they didn't have the most sort of rounded experience, I think, before they went to the professional game. Obviously, Babbage had, you know, decent amateur experience, but he wasn't a standout. Fabio Wardley didn't. He was a white-collar fighter, and Conor, we know about and we've spoken about, didn't really either. So, you know, he used to spar with his dad more than anyone else, I think. So it's interesting to see sort of where the journey's going to take them, but they're all good characters, they're all good talkers, and they all can fight, and we like watching them. They're all exciting. So yeah, look, I'm looking forward to all of it. I think the Babbage little fight, you know, Tom looks in great shape. You know, he never comes and puts he'll certainly put everything into it. He never comes and puts a sort of disappointing display on, does he? He has had, you know, stoppage defeats before, but I think if he does go down, it'll be all guns blazing. That's what we want with Babbage. We want to see if Babbage can be tested as well. But you know, that's a fight that can only end by knockout, you'd have thought. Richard Lartey and no party, or does he want a party, or does he come over here just for a bit of fun? I don't know. He's a hard man as well, and he's very light. He's a very nice character, but he's a hard guy, you know, and we know him before, so he'll put everything into it. Fabio Wardley is, could be the sleeper in the heavyweight division. You know, it was a very good performance at Fight Camp against Vallily, and it's a step at a time with all these fighters. How far can Babbage go? He is a small heavyweight, even if he won't admit it. He does only fight one way, but he can go. He can take us on a great ride, can't he? Where that ride's going to go to and how far it's going to go, we don't know. Same can be said with Fabio Wardley, and the same can be said with Conor Benn. Be interesting in sort of 2-3 years' time, KUGAN, looking back at this and seeing how far they've all gone and where they've ended up. But I think it's going to be fun watching it.
Absolutely. The other huge news this week is obviously regarding our very own Callum-Smith, who takes on Saul Alvarez Canelo on the 19th of December. Looking like Texas, that's not been confirmed yet. But first of all, great obviously for British boxing, and that Canelo gets a crack at another Brit. I mean, the list of Brits is quite lengthy in his resume, but Callum-Smith gets his chance.
Including his brother Liam, of course, who will be able to give Callum some tips. Not that he needs them. Callum has been waiting for this fight for a long time. I'm delighted it's come off. He's a fantastic person. He's a wonderful fighter, Callum-Smith, and from a great family. And he deserves this. You know, he's been patient. You know, we saw him against John Ryder, and it was a tough night's work for him. And I think he's needed the big name. He's needed the big, grand fight for a long time. And obviously Canelo is just that. You know, we didn't know what was going on really with Canelo and Golden Boy and Dazn, and that seemed to be worked out. And finally we have a date. And any Canelo fight is obviously exciting for everybody in boxing. I've been privileged enough to be ringside on a number of occasions and called his fights. I think he's a very special fighter, and he's being around a fight with Canelo is something very memorable. He is he's a true great. He's a modern legend, and he's going to go down as one of the great fighters of our time. So, can Callum upset the apple cart? He's going to start an underdog, of course, as pretty much everybody does against Canelo. But you know what? Tony Bellew was standing just over there last week and said, Callum has got the best chance of anybody. He's big, he's strong, he's got a great jab, he's a fantastic inside fighter. He's underrated in that department, and he's got bags of belief as well. Callum-Smith's a really good fighter, and he deserves his opportunity. Yes, is it a mountain to climb like Kell Brook had with Terence Crawford? I don't think so. I don't think it's a mountain to climb. It's a very tough ask to beat Canelo in America. Of course it is. But Callum goes with all of our best wishes. And listen, if you can bring back the gold, if you can bring back the treasure, the scalp of Canelo Alvarez, then can we have that fight in Anfield finally in the spring? Maybe the rematch. It's a tough one, KUGAN, obviously, and Canelo's going to be very, very hard to beat. But we wish Callum well, and I'm delighted it's happened. And it's a pre-Christmas present for all boxing fans.
Are you disappointed that it's not on Sky Sports?
Of course, well, listen. Let's rephrase that and say that we always want to do all the big fights, all the great fights on Sky. We've had many conversations over this year about the difficulties with it all. At the moment, with no gates, it's very hard to even make big fights. We've got our contract in the UK with Matchroom, and we've got to make sure that these shows on British soil carry on. We know all the problems with the failed tests and COVID, and that's on top of all the difficulties we've had with boxing anyway, with injuries, with weight making, the weight making last week. There's always something happening, and it's a particularly difficult time. It's been a terribly hard year for so many people, and it's just great that boxing's back. So I'm delighted that the Canelo-Smith fight's been made, but obviously it's tough. We can't do everything at 4 in the morning. Canelo has the rights for this, and they want huge amounts of money, and it's it seems it's not the fight for us at this time, but unfortunately that's the way it is. Would I have loved to have done Luke Campbell and Garcia? Would I have loved to have done this? Would I have loved to have done Kell Brook, albeit in a big defeat he suffered to Terence Crawford? And would I have loved to have done Lomachenko and Lopez? Of course, everyone at Sky wants to, but you've got to remember as well that every business is going through a difficult time this year, and the most important thing for us is to make sure our Matchroom contract over here. We've got the Golden contract as well to finish too. We've got a massive Sky box office event with Anthony Joshua and Kubrat Pulev the week before Callum-Smith. So it's a very difficult one. It's a difficult situation, and Eddie and I, and we've all had lots of conversations about it. But it's one that we'll be watching, unfortunately, rather than broadcasting, I think, at this stage.
Adam, you've always said that more competition the better. You've kind of in previous interviews you've talked about kind of BT Sports introduction into boxing over the years and ITV, etc., etc. But with obviously Dazn UK obviously coming to Dazn coming to the UK in December, that looking like the first show that they'll broadcast in the UK. Do you not look at that as slightly different, because the fights that they're broadcasting, we would kind of think of the ones that Sky would have been broadcasting? There's obviously fights on BT that's Frank's stable and that's Queensberry's stable, but these fights that are happening on Dazn potentially are the ones involving Matchroom fighters that have featured on Sky Sports regularly, as Callum-Smith has, as Luke Campbell has. Do you look at that slightly differently?
I knew you were going to ask me that question, because of course Luke Campbell we've been with for so long, and Callum-Smith as well, most of his career. There was a big break though for Callum. We've got to remember that Callum and Joe went off to the World Super Series, and that was on ITV for a long time. So we lost our main event fighter on Sky Sports, and that wasn't our decision. We didn't. Obviously he went and won the World Super Series, which was brilliant, and beat George Groves, and it was a fantastic achievement, and everybody very proud. But of course that wasn't broadcast on Sky. So I think each situation is different as you go through. There is only a certain amount of money in a pot. There's only a certain amount of fights that you can make with that money, etc. And I think everybody in boxing is doing such a great job at the moment of trying to get their fighters out in very difficult circumstances. Box office fights are made because you can only make them really through big box office nights, and when you take the gate away, it's very, very hard. So I like to think on the positives that we've done, and that is Fight Camp, that is the Whyte Povetkin first fight with Katie Taylor and Delphine Persoon, Usyk Chisora. We would have been doing Povetkin Whyte the rematch this week. We've got to obviously wait a few weeks on that, and then Anthony Joshua and Kubrat Pulev, which is a huge fight, which remember was going to be in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, or a big stadium in Britain, or we hope that will happen down the line, but it's happening in front of 150 people probably max, and that's really, really difficult. So it's very hard. Everybody's got to adapt. Everybody's got to look at different money, but with the opportunities. And look, we always knew Dazn were going to launch globally. We thought it would happen back in September. Now it's going to happen in December. And I think we look at it and say, look, we'd love to have had Callum Smith fighting over here, but we've got Billy Joe Saunders fighting over here, and we've got Conor Benn fighting, and you know the fact is that Callum Smith has got this opportunity to go and win, you know, what would be the biggest fight and night of his life, and that opportunity came because of Canelo, and it became in America, and unfortunately that's just not where we are at the minute. So it is disappointing, of course, but it's disappointing that we don't get other fights, and you know, we just got to concentrate on the fights that we have got, and we talk about the other ones. We're independent, we talk about it. As you said, I talk regularly about how excited I am, and next week with Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce, I think it's a fantastic match. I'm very excited about Canelo and Callum. I think the difference is with you know, maybe Canelo and Callum is that although they're massive names in boxing, you know, Canelo, yes, would be known maybe by some in the streets, but Callum Smith in Liverpool, yes, but out of that, maybe not. And you know, that's the difficulty we've got. And Anthony Joshua, of course, and Tyson Fury and Katie Taylor and those sort of names, you know, they've had, you know, huge exposure, and when they're, you know, your big heavyweight stars, you know, and they've got that, you know, Tyson and AJ have got those sort of different but compelling personalities. You know, they really attract, and the heavyweight world does. You know, Dillian Whyte, Derek Chisora, we've seen that. But I think, you know, if Callum goes and beats Canelo, then, you know, then he becomes a superstar, doesn't he? And that's when, you know, obviously British boxing can be very, very proud. They're proud enough already of Callum Smith and what he's done, the World Super Series. But, you know, unfortunately, that part of it's not been on Sky. But we're used to that over the years, KUGAN. You know, we've had Amir Khan on, off. You know, it's very difficult to keep a fighter on one, you know, one broadcasting channel the whole of their career. We very nearly did it with Ricky Hatton, you know, from start to finish. But it is hard. Some have come through terrestrial, ITV, some have, you know, moved over to BT, some have... And I think, you know, you just do the best we can. There's good boxing on BT at the moment. You know, Channel 5 are coming back. I think they've got an Eggington-Theophane fight. We've got, you know, obviously Fox and ESPN and everybody in the States, Showtime still. It's fantastic that there are so many different broadcasters, and you're right, I do embrace competition. It keeps the everybody at Sky who are so passionate about boxing on their toes, and I will also say that we are the ones that have stuck with it still, you know, year in, year out. And you know, for Dazn are unproven, aren't they? I mean, they've launched in America, they've launched around the world in various different sports. They're unproven in Britain. You know, we've seen other, you know, we've seen Setanta, we've seen BoxNation, we've seen ITV Digital, we've seen BBC, we've seen all sorts of, you know, broadcasters try their hand in boxing, and some stay with it longer than others. And you know, BT have done a good job over the last few years, but you know, we get a lot of criticism at Sky on, you know, on fights, on fight nights, on shows, on not doing this, not doing that. We can't have everything. It is a business still, and I will say that we are the one broadcaster that has stuck with boxing, and through all the difficult times, the very hard times when the papers weren't writing about it, when, you know, there was a lot of leisure centres being filled up as opposed to arenas and stadiums, we stuck with it, and we've done that for a very long time. So I think we deserve some credit for it, not that we look for that and not that we ask for that, because we try and put everything each time into whatever production we've got, however difficult it is, whatever level it is. We try and give it the Sky sparkle and the Sky push with the brilliant people we've got on our production and our operational teams, and throughout Sky Sports News and all of our outlets, our fantastic arsenal that we've got to push boxing, which I believe is still in a complete league of its own. That's why we can get behind an AJ Pulev fight like no one else can, and that's why when hopefully we get the Joshua Fury mega matches down the line, we'll prove why Sky, you know, delivers boxing at its very best. And you know, we deliver it. Look at the AJ Klitschko nights, look at what we managed out in Saudi Arabia, you know, all of those sort of things that are overlooked at what sort of goes on behind the scenes, the production and the brilliance of people at Sky. There are brilliant people in other broadcasters, at Dazn. There are brilliant people at BT and at Fox and at Showtime and everywhere else. And that's their businesses. Am I going to criticise them? No, of course not. We're glad that boxing is being talked about in the way it is, and we're glad that it's being broadcast, most of all for the fighters, that they can get paid in what's been a very, very difficult year. The fighters are what makes this sport, and if they're getting their opportunities like Luke Campbell is against Ryan Garcia, like Callum Smith is against Canelo, I am absolutely all for it. Would I love to broadcast every single one of them? You and I know that I would. Is it possible in the climate that we're in? No. and that's just the way it is. So some of them we're broadcasting. We've got big nights coming up with Conor, Benn. We've got a big night coming up with Billy Joe Saunders and Martin Murray. We've got the Golden Contract to finish, which I can't wait for. And then we've got AJ and Pulev, the biggest fight since Fury Wilder, which I was at, that wasn't on Sky in February, which was the biggest fight of the year until AJ Pulev get in a ring. Now listen, we're going to see if Fury and AJ can meet in 2021. Anthony's got business to take care of in a very dangerous fight against Kubrat Pulev. And then you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and have a little time with the family, and I'm going to tune in and watch Callum Smith give an almighty effort. And let's hope he can beat Canelo for British boxing. And if Canelo puts on another masterclass, you take your hat off to one of the great fighters of modern times. But I, for one, am going to be enjoying it, whatever channel it's on.
Okay. Just coming back to Kell Brook, obviously suffered a defeat to Terence Crawford at Las Vegas last weekend. I'm assuming you would have watched the fight. What were your thoughts on that, Adam?
I did. It was a late one, wasn't it? And we didn't need the 30 minutes of quite bizarre sort of commission studying of a tape, which I think we'd all ascertained was an eye problem caused by punches. But there we go. You never know in this sport. Dame Helen Mirren even posted, I don't know if you saw that, her disappointment. But there we go. That fight, there can only be a rematch of that one. Yeah, disappointed not to be televising Kell Brook, so watched it, of course. And, you know, he had a decent enough start. Didn't quite, as he said in the interview afterwards, didn't quite, you know, stamp his authority when he did have, you know, a good 2 or 3 rounds. Unfortunately, walked into a shot, and that was it. You know, never recovered. Quite worrying that he said in the ring afterwards, you know, what happened. I remember Lennox Lewis doing the same thing when he got knocked out by Hasim Ratman in South Africa. It's horrible when you see that, and you just don't know what's gone wrong. Look, it was always going to be a very, very big ask, a big assignment for Kell Brook at this stage of his career, back down at welterweight in America against a guy who is literally taking everybody out. You know, he looks like a changed fighter since Terence Crawford fought Ricky Burns all those years ago. You know, he's been incredible. He's got amazing momentum, and of course, the fight we all want to see is with Errol Spence. So look, it's, you know, it was disappointing for Kell. I know he was in terrific shape. I know he really believed. I swapped messages with him in the week. He really believed he was going to, you know, bring the world title home again. But I think maybe, you know, because of his age and stage and everything that's happened, you know, over the years. You know, it just wasn't meant to be, and Terence Crawford, you know, like Errol Spence did, prove their quality. You know, listen, Kell's lost to what? Errol Spence, Gennady Golovkin, Terence Crawford. You know, you look at Ricky Hatton's career, losing to Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. It's no disgrace to lose to the best fighters of your generation. I think with Kell, that maybe 4 or 5 years ago, with that talent and punch power, you know, he would have had a much more level playing field with someone like Terence Crawford. So it's a shame. Let's see where he goes now. He'll sit down with his family. He'll. You know, it's not up for us to decide whether he should walk away from it now. He's made money. He's got a nice life, I'm sure. You know, could there be one last hurrah in that, you know, much vaunted fight with Amir Khan that we've all been talking about, you know, for so many years? Or do they, either of them, really need it now? Don't know. That's one for 2021. I want to wish Kell a happy Christmas, and I hope he gets some relaxing time with his lovely family. And you know, he owes us nothing. He's been a terrific fighter over so many years, and you know, he's been great to be around. And you know, personally, it was sad to see him lose like that. But again, like, you know, when you talk about fighters like Canelo and the great fighters in the world, Terence Crawford is one of them, and I think it's better to say what a performance from Terence Crawford. It was another fantastic stoppage win, and let's hope we move towards the big matchup with Errol Spence, because I, for one, will want to be there, watch it, televise it, see it, whatever channel it ends up on. It's a fight that needs to be made for world boxing, and let's hope it is one that can be.
Following Bob Arums' comments from the weekend, much publicised regarding Terence Crawford and Terence Crawford's comments over the last day or so, I mean, it looks possible that that relationship may come to an end at some point. Things don't seem to be right there. I think that's quite obvious to see.
Yeah, it sort of came as a surprise, really. You know, sometimes in boxing you don't know. You think you know what's happening behind closed doors, and you don't really know. And you know, relationships change left, right, and centre. You know, I know Eddie was very disappointed with Kell's decision to go to make that fight, and you know, he made it. I think he spoke to you at length about that. And you know, relationships change. Do you want, you know, when you've worked with a fighter, I like to see, because we're not promoters, we're broadcasters, and you know, we like working with fighters, but ultimately you can't work with them all the time, and things change. We have to see what Terence Crawford does. That's their business, just like it is the business of Team Wilder and Team Fury to work out what's going on with that. Disappointed not to see and know that Tyson wanted to fight. Disappointed not to see him on December the 5th. You know, I know he was in hard training camp, and you know, he said to me a couple of times this year, I want to be back in the ring before the end of the year, and I'm sure he's very disappointed that that's not happened. But whatever, look, that's not our business. You know, that's up to Team Wilder and Team Fury to work out. Will that mean that they fight in the new year before any matchup between Joshua and Fury is possible? If Joshua beats Pulev, does that mean he has to fight Alexander Usyk next? There's all these things that go around in boxing, and you know, the big fights are tough to make. So does that make it any closer for Crawford to fight Spence, or any further away? You know, you tell me. It's a strange one. It's a difficult one, isn't it? But I think all the fans want to see is the best matches possible. And to be honest, I think in the last few months we've done pretty well after what's been a traumatic year, and still is. You know, let's not forget that the most important thing is the health and safety of the fighters. That is why we go through the testing in these bubbles. That is why there are no crowd. We all want the crowd back in 2021. We can't wait for that. We all want the big fights. But you know, we talk a lot about them. Some are made, some aren't. Brooke Khan, never made. Will it be now? You know, as late on in their careers. You know, you sort of shake your head, KUGAN, there. And maybe it's a fight that just doesn't need to be made, because they've both, you know, done well in their careers, and they can, you know, Amir seems to be working on other things in the Middle East, and Kell's got some, you know, time with the family to digest his career and think what he wants to do. So it's not up to us to tell them, but they are fighters, you know, and you know, they occasionally do get an itch, and they want to get back in the ring, and they want to fight. So we just have to wait and see on all these matches. But I'm not there to make them happen. I just I hope they do.
Adam, I don't know if you've noticed, but we actually started the interview over there.
Yeah. Why did we move around?
No,
like this?
because you've swayed that way. My camera's kind of stayed. But you can't go any further because there's a.
I think it's because Eddie and I are meant to have a chat right now.
I won't
it's
keep.
not to get away from you, KUGAN. As I said, I'm
trying to quietly slip round.
I'll come back nearer you.
No, it's fine there. You're fine there.
Listen, I'll answer anything that you want, and I know that they're difficult questions, because you know Sky often finds itself under pressure. You know, we've been under pressure before. You know, we used to have a great deal of promoters, and everyone said, well, why are we having, you know, this on this and this on this and this promoter doing that? And then you get Matchroom, and we've, I think, quite well rebuilt boxing for a number of years, and then, you know, we get stones thrown at us again because we don't have every single great international fight on. It's very difficult. You know, we're a corporation, we're a business, we're Sky, and we also have, you know, a Comcast huge umbrella which have NBC and Universal, and you know, sport is not often the main part of it's a big part of Sky. It's not often the main part of, you know, Comcast and NBC and Universal's talk the whole time. And boxing is of course big, as we know, a few times a year. So you know, we have to take that into consideration too. As a fight fan, and as head of boxing development, and as you know, I want as much as we can muster. Every single fight, I'll be happy to do a fight every single week of you know, from the UK and from America. You know, if finance is allowed, if all of that allowed. I mean, you can't. It's just not possible, is it? So, you know, we're doing the best we can in what's a difficult situation for the world, and I think we're doing all right.
Adam, just finally, obviously coming back off that Tyson Fury conversation, he was obviously due to fight 5th of December. He's not. He'll be in action in 2021 now. Who against first? We don't know. We don't know whether he takes that kind of fight he was meant to have, that kind of level fight.
I don't think
or does he jump in with the third fight with Wilder, or does he go in straight with Asia? I mean, we don't know yet.
Every time I talk to Tyson, he said he wants one person, and that's Anthony Joshua. Now, I don't know about the contracts. You know, Shelley and Team Wilder will be working on that, and if he's got to fight Wilder next, he fights Wilder next. That was what was going to happen. So there's not much difference there, in that maybe if Joshua beats Pulev, he could fight Alexander Usyk as his mandatory, but it just obviously delays, you know, the unification with Joshua and Fury. But then again, you know, would it be for the WBO title if Joshua went straight into that? What would Alexander Usyk say? So there's a lot of things. Plus, let's not forget, Joshua's got to get past Pulev. He's only ever lost once. He's very dangerous. He's been a bit the forgotten man here. You know, he's got one loss to Vladimir Klitschko. This is a tough fight. You know, Anthony Joshua lost to Andy Ruiz, you know, just over a year ago. Let's not forget that. So Pulev's going to fancy his chances here. You know, I don't think that Tyson Fury would have wanted to fight Agit Kabayel, although if he had to, he would have done. I think he wants the big fights, whether that's Joshua or whether that's Wilder. I don't think Fury will want to or need a warm-up fight to go back into that. I mean, if he does, that's his business. But my gut feeling is he'll go straight into either Wilder if he has to, or Joshua if he can. And we just have to wait and see what happens in the next few weeks here, and obviously what happens with the mediation and the litigation and everything that's happening with Team Wilder and Team Fury. And they need to sort that out before we have a clearer picture of what happens in 2021. But it's got to happen, hasn't it, at some point? Fury, Joshua, Fury, a couple of fights. I think we're going to get it because I think both fighters want it more than anything. And normally, unless, you know, there's a Pulev win or there's a Kabayel win or there's a Wilder win or whatever, normally, you know, if two fighters really want it, it will get made.
Adam, Deontay Wilder, I don't know if you saw his interview. I know, you're trying. I don't know if you saw his interview with Brian Custer. I don't know if you've seen that interview.
I haven't yet.
Okay, but obviously you would have seen the highlights of that. It's
called
called for Dillian Whyte's name in that. What did you make of that?
You know, I mean, there's so many different ways that the heavyweight world can move, isn't there? So many ways. You know, Dillian's got, I think, the most important fight of his life against Alexander Povetkin. He needs to beat Povetkin. You know, when the Povetkin failed the COVID test, and I spoke to Dillian and his team, and they were like, "Oh, we want to get out. Can we fight? Can we fight? Yeah, Derek Chisora again? Can we fight someone?" And I was like, I said, "Look, yeah, any of these heavyweight fights can be made, and we'll watch them. But isn't the most important thing for Dillian Whyte to get that, if he can, that victory over Alexander Povetkin? At the moment, you know, he's had a wonderful sort of 3 or 4 years of fighting everybody, got himself to WBC mandatory, ready for that chance, and unfortunately slipped at the final hurdle against Alexander Povetkin. Give the big Russian, you know, some real credit. You know, that was a terrific punch, and you know, it laid him out. And I love Dillian's attitude of, I want to get back in with him. He hasn't blamed anyone. This is what happens. Look, he could fight Wilder. He could fight Joshua down the line again. He could fight Fury. I think Dillian Whyte should be fighting Alexander Povetkin next. And I think Deontay Wilder needs to try and get this fight with Tyson Fury over. Or maybe we get him and Whyte in after that. But I think, personally, the fight that I think needs to be seen is the rematch between Povetkin and Whyte. Because I think, you know, Dillian's coming off a defeat, a bad defeat. And I think he needs to try and right that wrong, if he can. Maybe the delay will give him that little bit more opportunity to work on things, because I think a lot of people thought it was a very short turnaround. But Povetkin will be very, very confident he can go in and do it again. And if he does it twice, you know, Dillian's going to have, you know, a tougher path, isn't he? A much tougher path. But if he gets that victory over Povetkin, we can sort of move on and say, right, that was a blip that night. He was on the way to a win. He got caught. And now he can continue. But there's big fights for all of them next year. But there's a lot of politics to navigate through first. And that's sort of what we get compelled with, isn't it? Not just the actual, you know, what happens in the squared circle. It's all the stuff that happens in the build-up to these fights. And, you know, is this going to happen? Will that happen? And that's what keeps us 24/7 and involved and busy and speculating and planning and plotting and chatting and debating and answering questions and asking questions, KUGAN, and that's why we love it.
Okay, Adam, I've taken up a lot of your time this afternoon, so much appreciated. We look forward to a great card on Sky Sports this weekend. You've swayed all the way. You're a swayer, Adam. Not a swinger, a swayer. Swayer.
Try and answer the questions, KUGAN, as best I can. And you know that I will do that.
Thank you very much, Adam Smith.
Is your debt causing you sleepless nights? Knock your debt out with Debt KO. And your debt won't be the only thing keeping you up at night. Debt KO, free impartial advice on all your debt.